There is a certain kind of salary that still sounds impressive when you say it out loud. $120,000. Not billionaire money, not private jet money. Just the kind of number that, for a long time in America, meant you had made it into stable adulthood. You were supposed to be okay. You were supposed to have options. Maybe not luxury, but margin. Maybe not wealth, but a life that didn't feel like it was constantly one surprise expense away from becoming a problem. And then you put that salary inside California. Not all of California. Specifically, the two places that keep attracting ambition, reinvention, and people willing to bargain with reality in exchange for possibility. Los Angeles and the Bay Area. And suddenly, a six-figure income stops behaving like a social fact and starts behaving like a psychological experiment. Because in 2026, living on $120,000 in either place is not really about whether you are technically doing fine. On paper, a lot of people at that income are doing fine. The real question is, what kind of life that number can still hold together, and what parts of yourself it quietly forces you to edit out. That's the brutal reality here. Not that $120,000 is poverty. The brutal part is that it is success without relief. It is a salary that can still impress your relatives back home while failing to calm your nervous system where you actually live. And that emotional contradiction is now one of the defining middle-class experiences in coastal California. As of 2026, the broad economic pressure is not imagined. The Bureau of Labor Statistics shows year-over-year inflation running at 3.7% in the Los Angeles area and 3.8% in the San Francisco area as of April 2026, with especially painful increases in energy and gasoline. In other words, this isn't just about rent staying high. It's about everyday friction getting more expensive too. So when people ask whether $120,000 is enough, they're usually asking the wrong question. Enough for what? Enough to rent alone? Enough to have a child? Enough to save? Enough to buy? Enough to feel grown? Enough to stop comparing? Enough to live in these places the way these places are constantly advertised to be lived in? Those are different questions. And LA and the Bay punish them differently. Before we get into the emotional math, it helps to say something simple and a little uncomfortable. A $120,000 salary in 2026 is still objectively strong by national standards. But in Los Angeles and the Bay Area, it often functions less like upper-middle-class security and more like a defensive salary. A salary that protects you from immediate collapse, but not from prolonged strain. A salary that keeps you in the room, but doesn't guarantee comfort once you're there. MIT's 2026 living wage data makes that shift painfully clear. In Los Angeles County, a single adult with no children needs about $60,161 pre-tax to meet a basic living wage threshold. In Santa Clara County, one of the core counties of the Bay Area economy, that number rises to $79,043. For a household with 2 working adults and 2 children, the required pre-tax income jumps to about $140,735 in Los Angeles County and $201,397 in Santa Clara County. That's the part people feel before they can always articulate it. $120,000 is still meaningful for one adult, but for families, especially on one income, it stops looking comfortable very quickly. And once you understand that, the comparison between LA and the Bay stops being a simple cost of living debate. It becomes a study in trade-offs. Los Angeles usually offers a slightly wider on-ramp. The Bay Area usually offers a sharper ceiling. LA tends to ask for more of your time, your driving, your patience, your logistical stamina. The Bay tends to ask for more of your square footage, your long-term security, your sense of class identity. Both can make a six-figure earner feel strangely cornered. If you're single and making $120,000, LA can still look survivable in a way the Bay often doesn't. Not easy, not relaxed, but survivable. Rental trackers vary, but they cluster around the same truth. In mid-2026, Los Angeles one-bedroom rents are still commonly landing in the low 2,100s, with average overall rents around the mid-2000s, depending on the platform and property mix. That's expensive, but still meaningfully below San Francisco, where one-bedroom figures are in the mid to high 3,000s, and overall average rents are around $4,000 on some current trackers. The exact number changes depending on whether you look at asking rents, listed inventory, or citywide averages. The psychological conclusion does not. The Bay starts charging you more just to be alone. That difference matters because rent is never just rent in these cities. Rent decides whether your apartment is a place you recover or merely the place you sleep between obligations. In Los Angeles, $120,000 may still get you a solo one-bedroom in some neighborhoods without making you feel instantly reckless. It may not be the version of LA people fantasize about. Maybe not the polished West Side fantasy. Maybe not the hillside view. Maybe not the walkable life you imagined when you first moved. But there is still some room, in parts of LA, to live alone and remain socially legible. In the Bay, especially in San Francisco or near the core job corridors, $120,000 often turns solitude into a luxury purchase. And that changes the emotional texture of adulthood. Because at a certain age, roommates stop being just roommates. They start becoming a referendum. Not always, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, especially professionals in their 30s, sharing housing is no longer interpreted neutrally. It starts to feel like a delayed milestone, a way of telling yourself a story about flexibility while quietly wondering whether the economy has permanently pushed back the version of life you thought you were working toward. That pressure is not only financial, it's symbolic. The housing market makes the contrast even harsher. As of May 2026, Redfin shows a median sale price of roughly $1.05 million in Los Angeles and about $1.70 million in San Francisco. And mortgage rates have not rescued anybody from that reality. Freddie Mac reported the average 30-year fixed mortgage at 6.52% in June 2026. Put those numbers together, and homeownership stops feeling like a stretch goal and starts looking like a different economic species entirely. And this is where the phrase good income begins to collapse under its own vagueness. Because yes, $120,000 is a good income. But a good income is not the same thing as a home buying income in places where median home prices have moved into 7-digit territory and interest rates are still above 6%. In practical terms, even if someone on $120,000 has been disciplined, even if they have strong credit, even if they somehow have a serious down payment, the monthly cost of buying a median-priced home in either market becomes punishing fast. In Los Angeles, it can easily land in territory that would dominate take-home pay. In San Francisco, for many buyers, it moves beyond domination and into absurdity. So the psychological effect is not just, I can't buy yet. It's more corrosive than that. It's the feeling that the normal ladder has been moved so far away that even standing upright on solid ground starts to feel like losing. That matters. Because middle-class stability in America has never only been about present consumption. It has also been about future conversion, the belief that today's sacrifice eventually turns into ownership, permanence, and leverage. When that conversion breaks, people don't just feel priced out. They feel narratively stalled. Now, this is where Los Angeles and the Bay Area diverge in a way that isn't obvious from a spreadsheet. LA is expensive. But LA often disguises its expensiveness by giving you more visual evidence of life, more apartment space sometimes, more sunlight, more movement, more neighborhoods where normal-looking people are still trying to piece together something plausible, more opportunities to feel like your life exists outside work. The Bay, particularly around the tech orbit, can do the opposite. It can make a respectable income feel small simply because of who and what surrounds it. That's an important distinction. In LA, the pressure often comes from logistics. In the Bay, the pressure often comes from comparison. Los Angeles asks, can you handle this much friction? The Bay asks, why are you still behind? And those are not the same psychological burden. In Los Angeles, the cost of living often gets hidden inside transportation and time. The city can appear cheaper at first glance, but then it starts charging you in fragments. Long drives, parking, insurance, gas. The emotional toll of building your day around traffic patterns, even if transit has improved and LA Metro's standard fare remains relatively low at $1.75 with a $5 daily cap and $18 weekly cap, the lived structure of the city is still deeply car-shaped for a huge number of residents. That matters because cars are not just a side expense in LA. They are often the price of participation. AAA's 2026 estimate for owning and operating a new vehicle is $11,577 a year, or roughly $965 a month. And that's a national ownership figure before you even get to the peculiar intensity of Southern California driving. On June 19, 2026, AAA also showed average regular gas at about $5.61 in Los Angeles, Long Beach. So when someone says LA is cheaper than the Bay, that can be true in housing terms, while still being emotionally misleading in everyday life. You may be saving on rent compared with San Francisco, while bleeding money and sanity into the machinery required to function there. The Bay's trade-off is different. The Bay can sometimes reduce the need for a car, especially if you live and work in the right corridor. But that doesn't mean mobility is simple or cheap. BART fares are distance-based and do not offer monthly passes, which means your commute cost scales with where you can afford to live. In San Francisco itself, SFMTA's adult monthly Muni Pass is currently listed around $86, or $104 for a pass that includes BART within San Francisco. So yes, the Bay can offer a more transit-viable life than much of LA, but it also has a way of monetizing proximity. The farther financial survival pushes you from work, the more the commute can start taking its payment back. That's why two people making the same salary can report totally different versions of being fine. One person is spending too much to live alone. Another is spending too much to save time. Another is spending too much to stay near work. Another is spending too much to avoid needing a second car. Another is technically okay, but only because retirement contributions have been quietly turned off, vacations have gotten shorter, and every future plan has been placed in the category of later. Later is one of the most expensive words in America. For families, the story gets rougher. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Just rough in the way adult life is rough, when every number has to perform too many jobs. A $120,000 household income with children in these regions doesn't just face high costs. It faces stacking costs. Housing, childcare, health insurance, transportation, food, and the invisible premium of needing your life to be reliable. MIT's 2026 figures show that for one child, estimated annual childcare costs are about $13,191 in Los Angeles County and $22,266 in Santa Clara County. Housing for a single adult in MIT's model comes in around $22,471 a year in Los Angeles County and $31,614 in Santa Clara County. Those numbers climb further depending on household structure. These are not luxury assumptions. These are basic needs calculations. That's the part that often gets missed in online salary debates. People talk about six figures as if it's a universal solvent, as if the moment the number starts with a 1, the problem has been solved. But a family doesn't experience money as a single headline number. A family experiences money as a system that either absorbs disruption or fails under it. Can one parent stay home? Can the car break down? Can the rent go up? Can the childcare arrangement fall apart? Can one person get sick? Can anyone save for college while also saving themselves? That is what enough actually means in grown-up life. And in both LA and the Bay, $120,000 can run out of flexibility before it runs out of prestige. That creates a distinct kind of class anxiety, the anxiety of appearing stable while feeling structurally exposed. You see it in the families who look fine from the outside. Good school district, nice photos, respectable jobs, but underneath, almost every decision is being made to prevent one category from collapsing into another. The larger apartment means thinner savings. The safer neighborhood means a longer commute. The preschool means no real vacation. The second child means the budget stops being theoretical and starts becoming a daily mood. And because these are expensive, aspirational regions, that strain is often hidden behind competence. People become very polished at looking less worried than they are. There's also a deeper identity split between these two places. Los Angeles still allows for illusion. Sometimes that's bad. Sometimes it's expensive, but it's real. LA lets people perform aspiration with a little more softness. You can be financially stretched and still feel socially alive. You can eat outside in January. You can have more physical room than your bank account would predict. You can still believe, on certain days, that your life is expanding. The Bay is less forgiving in that specific way. The Bay, especially around tech wealth, has a sharper relationship between money and visible security. More people around you own stock. More people around you bought earlier. More people around you seem plugged into systems that compound. So even if your salary is solid, you may feel less buffered, less impressive, less future-proof. That doesn't mean one region is happier than the other. It means the pressure lands on different nerves. In LA, you may feel overextended. In the Bay, you may feel downgraded. And those feelings shape behavior. They shape dating. They shape family timing. They shape whether people stay. They shape whether someone says yes to a wedding, a baby, a dog, a second bedroom, a parent moving in, a career pivot, a dream that doesn't monetize quickly enough. A city doesn't just determine your expenses. It determines what risks feel morally irresponsible. That might be the most brutal part of all, because once a place gets expensive enough, it starts telling people not just what they can afford, but what kind of person they are allowed to become. If we strip away the branding, the cleaner comparison is this. In Los Angeles, $120,000 can still buy a life that looks somewhat normal, but often only by outsourcing the cost to stress, time, or delayed savings. In the Bay Area, $120,000 can still buy access to one of the most powerful labor markets in the world, but often at the cost of space, ownership, and psychological ease. Neither version is fake. Neither version is simple. And both are full of people who keep wondering why they make too much money to feel broke and not enough money to feel secure. That in-between condition has become one of the defining emotional zones of American urban life. Not poverty, not comfort, not failure, not freedom, just constant calculation. The calculations are a little different depending on where you stand. In LA, maybe you tell yourself the drive is worth it because at least you have a second bedroom. In the Bay, maybe you tell yourself the smaller place is worth it because at least you're closer to the job network. In LA, maybe you spend more to preserve your mood. In the Bay, maybe you spend more to preserve your trajectory. In both places, the budget is also autobiographical. It reveals what you're protecting: privacy, time, school quality, career upside, family help, a little dignity, a little quiet, a version of adulthood that still feels recognizable. And once you see it that way, this stops being a regional comparison video and becomes something bigger. It becomes a story about what America now does to people who did what they were told. Get educated, work hard, reach 6 figures, move to opportunity, stay productive, stay ambitious, stay grateful, and then discover that success in some of the most opportunity-rich corners of the country increasingly means managing disappointment professionally. So is $120,000 enough in LA or the Bay Area in 2026? For a single adult, often yes, but usually with compromises that are much more serious than the number suggests. For couples, it depends on housing, geography, and whether both incomes are working. For families with kids, especially on one income, the answer gets much harsher, much faster. But the deeper answer is this. In Los Angeles, $120,000 often loses to the cost of operating your life. In the Bay Area, $120,000 often loses to the cost of securing your future. That's the split. LA drains you in motion. The Bay compresses you in place. And the reason people argue about this so intensely is because they're not really arguing about rent. They're arguing about what kind of struggle feels more survivable. If you've lived in either place on what looked like a good salary, I'm curious what the number actually bought you and what it quietly took from you. Not the internet version, the real version. And if this kind of documentary is your lane, the kind that stays with the emotional math, not just the spreadsheet you already know, whether this is worth sticking around for.